I just talk a bit about how to write well. So number one, accept it's slow. Writing is really slow, and I've been earning my living as a writer for a long time now, and I still don't know how long something is going to take me. And some days I'm surprised by how quick it is, and some days I'm horrified by how slow it is. And it's still very, very difficult to know how long something will take. When I used to teach at QUT, I taught a unit in publications, and the students would produce a brochure across the semester. And they'd be so horrified when in the first lecture, I'd tell them that in this unit, you're going to produce a brochure, you know, a 3-panel brochure thing. And they found it really challenging to do that in a 1-semester unit. And I'd say to them, when you're working, after you've been working for about 12 months, this is an afternoon's work. And that's how much faster you get. I think that the first draft is about 1/3 of an author's time. So in terms of thinking about how you plan your own timing, once you've got a first draft, you're about 1/3 of the way there. Now, that's hugely flexible depending on what you call a first draft and how polished your first draft is. But it's a really nice rule of thumb. And then if you think about the author's work in terms of an overall project, the author's work might be half the project and it might be less than half. And that will depend a lot on, you know, if you're working with a publisher or if you're working with somebody who has to produce it, it will vary according to the project, but it's a really nice guideline because people think they've written this, it's done. And in a lot of cases, the work's just beginning. And so knowing that it's going to take a long time can be really helpful. So how to write well, when it's time to edit, chuck away your creative person and let the editor get to work. And I love this picture. I'm in an editors group and somebody put this picture up on our Facebook group one day. So can you see you've got the cutlery at the top, the writer has made it all messy and it's in a terrible state. And then the editor comes along behind and fixes it up. That's what I do to people's writing. I figure out what belongs together and I fix it up. Somebody else told me once that editors they're coin operated. So people get worried about sending something to an editor because the editor's going to, you know, judge their work or something when they send them an email. And if you say, well, no, actually editors are coin operated, that is, we only work when we're paid, it frees you up to not worry so much about what somebody's going to say. I get a lot of people who say, I want to send you an email, but I'm really worried about whether I can write it. And it's like, yeah, do you think I don't make mistakes? I make mistakes all the time. Just get over it. Just write what you need to write. So when I'm writing, I try to get the structure right before I focus on the sentence level issues. And for me, editing is a multi-phased job. And so in my own work, I like to go through it multiple times, looking for different things each time. And people love to worry about commas and word choice, and those things happen really near the end. Often by the time I'm ready to run a spell check through something, there's no spelling errors left because I've been through it so many times and noticed them. Spelling is not my strong point. So tell you what, I'm jolly glad spell check exists. So there's this editing phase that we have to do where we need to think about the overall structure of a document. And this is something that I don't think that is taught very well at school or at university. And it's something that I would encourage you all to think about how you do it. How do you stop and look at a document and say, have I got my ideas in the right order? So in fiction, it would be, am I introducing concepts in an order that makes sense? Am I assuming knowledge later that I haven't introduced earlier? Those kinds of questions. In a non-fiction work, it's more around, have I provided a scaffold for my reader to understand where I'm going? And have I done structural things that make sense? Then there's this level of paragraph editing, and paragraphs matter more in non-fiction than in fiction. So in a non-fiction, particularly a workplace document, I'd be stopping and thinking, is every paragraph about one idea? And is every paragraph doing the job of a paragraph? So does it have a topic? And is that topic at the beginning of the paragraph? And do I then support that topic, if needed, with examples and evidence and whatever the reader needs to make it make sense? So there's this structural content-based editing stage that matters a lot more than is my comma right and have I put a full stop at the end of every sentence. So structural, paragraph, section-based editing comes first. Then I come down to the sentence level, and depending on how much work time I've got, I will go through every sentence and really think about, is that sentence structured as well as it can possibly be? Is it as tight as it can be? And this is practice, and this is reading a lot that helps a lot here. And then the correctness stuff comes last. At some point, if you're checking work, you've got to go through and check that every full stop is in the right place, that the footers are right, that every photograph has a caption, that every heading is right. And you just have to keep checking it. So that's the editorial stuff. Focus on a structure that makes sense for the genre that you're writing in. So if you've read widely in your genre, you'll know more about what works in your genre, and then you can come back and think about, have I mirrored that structure? Or if I haven't mirrored it, why? You can do anything you like, but it's really helpful to know why you've done it. And so if you can say, I followed this form, so I've done this in my work, I've got the ideas in this particular order, and I've done that for this reason, then that can help you know that you've produced something well. Okay, and so in a business kind of document, I might stop and say, I have structured this document by location. So I've structured it to talk about different parts of the state, and then within each part of the state, I have consistently talked about these themes, and they're always in the same order, and that makes sense for this particular document for this reason. And if I can talk to my client about that, that's really helpful. I was on the phone to a guy yesterday who's writing this book about business strategy, and what he wanted to do was at the end of each chapter, end of each subsection within a chapter, he wanted to say, right, we've just done that, now we're going to go on and do this. Okay, so that's that kind of chapter conclusion thing. And my advice was, let's not do that. It's really very confusing to readers when you foreshadow what's coming next at the end of a section. Now, he's keen to do it, so I've agreed with him that it'll go at the beginning of each section. So the beginning of each section says, in the last section we did that, now we're going to build on it by doing this. My personal preference is to not do that at all, but it's what he wants, and at least it's in a place that kind of makes sense. It's terrible for readers to get to the end of a section and be told, next we're going to do this. It just doesn't make sense. So foreshadowing at the end, no good at all. Now, a few people asked me about readers before. When I'm reviewing, one of the things I try really hard to do is to try to imagine what it's like for people I'd call new readers. So one of the hard things about writing is that you get to know your work so very well. You know it better than anybody else knows it, and it's very difficult to imagine what it's like not to have been inside your head while you've been writing it. So somehow you need to put the work aside for a little while and approach it with a mindset that says, is this going to make sense to somebody who's reading it for the first time when they haven't been inside my head, they haven't done my research? Those are the two things that matter most. And then there's a really good chance that that person's reading quickly, particularly a workplace document. They're reading it fast. They don't really want to read it. And another thing about workplace documents, they probably don't care. Okay, they've probably got stuff they'd much rather be doing than reading this document, so they don't care, and they're reading it quickly. Have I made it make sense for them? And that's a really important part of the editing phase. Now, in fiction, they're going to be questions more around, am I giving a payoff because the person who's reading this is giving me their time? I haven't, so have I provided them with what they need to understand where I'm coming from, to understand the world I'm landing them in? And then have I filled in the gaps enough so that they can understand where I'm taking them? And a mistake that a lot of us make as writers in all kinds of writing is that we leave out content. So in an effort to write small, instead of tightening up our sentences, we chuck out content. And really what you need to do is fill in enough gaps for people so that they can follow your train of thought. To really stop and think, what's it like for somebody who hasn't read this before? This is when your outside readers become really helpful. And if you can give them some questions that will help guide them as they're looking at your work, I think it can be a really useful thing to do. So yeah, I've got at the bottom of that slide, so often writers leave readers without the context they need to understand. People often dump readers in too late, and they often don't give them the background that they need. Now, I've got a strategy here that I use when I'm trying to check the structure of a document. So just remember that a lot of the work that I'm doing that I might apply this to would be an article or some kind of a, a longer business kind of document. I'd like to take documents back to a summary of each paragraph or section. So it's like a reverse contents list. I said I don't plan out at the beginning, but this is a reverse plan. So I'm creating a plan from the document that I've written. And what's important here is that it's a summary of what's in each paragraph or section, not an interpretation of it. It's really good to do this on a letter. Okay, so I've got some, when I'm teaching writing in workplaces, I've got this letter that I use for this. And when you assemble your summary of what was in each paragraph, then you can see how the document is structured. And it can help you ask questions about, have I got stuff in the right order? Should I actually have sections that aren't there? Have I got things at the beginning, at the end that should actually be put together? And it's the best way I know of figuring out whether the structure of a document is working or not. In fact, it's the only tool I know for really asking questions about how is this document structured and should I be structuring it differently? And I apply it to all kinds of documents. I do a little bit of work where people bring me a document and say, we know that this isn't quite right, but we don't know what's wrong with it. Can you help us? And that's what I do. I print it and I write in the margins what each paragraph is about, and then sometimes each section. And then I'll often draw little square brackets to hold things together to say, those 3 paragraphs there, they're a section. And those, they're a section. Why isn't that clear to a reader? And it's just a little tool that helps you to really think about structure. So that is, I reckon that's the best thing that I do for anybody, is doing that. Now, I think this next slide is pretty much my last content slide. I'm really interested in the different ways that we structure different kinds of documents. And so what's about to go up on the screen looks a bit complicated, but I'll talk you through it. It's actually not that complicated. And it gets at the difference between storytelling narrative and business news style documents. Okay, so it's about the different ways and the different promises we make to readers when we structure these documents. So on the left, I've got the typical structure for a story. And it comes from the structure of a, like a parable or a lesson kind of folk tale or something that you might tell to a child. What we do in a story is we tend to orient the reader. So we'll say, this is our setting, this is who we're dealing with, this is the situation. And then we complicate it. So if you're writing a novel, that's your act 1. And then we take us to a climax. It's the peak that we have to resolve, and then we resolve it. Okay, so there's this arc that goes on in the story. And what you're trying to do in a story is capture your reader and keep your reader guessing. And you do that by putting your key message at the end. So I'm writing a thriller right near the end, 5 pages, no more than 5 pages from the end, I'll tell you who did the murder. And that's the payoff. You've got your reward for reading it. I've answered the question. And often a narrative is structured by time. So time order. Obviously, it's not always presented in that way, but it's often mentally constructed that way. And then in a narrative, I don't interpret the meaning for my reader. So this is something that I've been really struggling with as I go from writing business documents to fiction, is that in fiction, I'm having to teach myself not to keep telling my reader what my characters think. They have to figure it out for themselves. And I've got to learn not to provide those overviews. So most of the work that I do is in this news category. And in this category, what you do is figure out your most important point, and I like the term elevator pitch, but in news you'd call it your lead. It's the thing that I most want you to remember. And in any kind of business document, I figure that out and I put that first, absolutely first. If I'm writing you a letter, I might start with, dear Sam, I hope you're having a great day. But then I give you my lead, okay? No more than that. And I hit you with my top message. And then underneath that, I've got sets of information that I structure in a way that makes sense for the document. Those sets may be like this or besides each other, or they may be a hierarchy, depending on what it is I'm writing. But I will always put the key information first. So in every section and in every paragraph and in every sentence, I work really hard to figure out what's most important and put it first and go, it's called a right branching. I put the less important stuff later. And that's how I keep my reader's attention. And I never, ever, ever keep my reader guessing. And I usually don't structure by time. So anybody who's writing a workplace document, if they've structured it according to historical time, the first thing I would usually do is undo that and put it into a theme-based structure. And then most of the time in these documents, I'm interpreting the meaning. So instead of writing you a novel where I'm giving you the payoff at the end by showing you who killed or who committed the murder, in my news style document, I start by saying this document is about this murder conducted in this place by this method. And in this document, I'm going to show you why it was done by a person with this type of pathology. And then I'll go through and give you all that. Okay. And for me, I think those distinctions are really useful because you can start to think about what it is you're writing and where it is you're trying to fit. Okay, so my last two things. This is one of my cards. No document will ever be perfect. At some point, you've got to decide the thing's finished. And I call it the point of diminishing returns. When you reach the point of diminishing returns, you have to let it go. So diminishing returns might be, I am really bored with this document. It's time to do something else. It might be, I have spent way too much time on it. It's got to go. Whatever it is, it's time to be done with it. And at some point, you've just got to send it out there into the world, accepting that it is not perfect. And it never will be. It'll always have a dumb spelling mistake. It'll always have a dumb mistake of fact in it. And it just kind of shows you're human, really, doesn't it? And then my last slide is my little sales pitch of my little things. So the Before You Write meditation, it's just up there for free on YouTube. And I'd love to see some people look at it and watch my viewers grow. That would be kind of exciting. And then my little Inspired to Write cards and my cafe book are there. I sell this stuff off my website. I've got a little shop on my website. And the book is also, it's in all the usual places electronically. And if ever anybody wants to talk self-publishing, I can talk self-publishing too. All right, that's that.
Thank you, Judy. Look, can everybody please thank Judy with one of those little reaction applauses? There's my little...
I can't see four people on the screen.
That's right. Yes, I know. It's very small. So, look, Judy, thank you so much. Can I ask Renee and Aoife both if you have any questions or comments that you have highlighted from what is, I've seen a couple. So.
Not really. It's mainly people just exchanging advice and saying that this is absolutely amazing advice that Judy's been giving.
Oh, thanks.
Same here. It's just that a lot of people are, well, Ross said he's been reinforced in his confidence because he has experience with most of what you've brought up, and it shows that they're on the right path and need to keep going. So everyone seems to have found your advice very, very practical and helpful.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And look, if I could find one word or a couple of words that will really sort of summarize what you've been saying, Judy, and that is that it's being honest with the self and the reader. That is the most important process. And that honesty, searching for that honesty and expressing that in the truth of your writing, true to yourself and true to your audience is, I think, the key, I think, that you've been talking about. Did you want to comment on that, some?
Yeah, I think writing in a way that feels genuine for you is really important. You need to produce the work that you feel is right and the work that you feel expresses you. That being said, there's this question of, how do I know if my work is any good or not? How do I know if I can construct a decent sentence? Particularly sentence construction's hard. And the best way that I do this is by putting a lot of effort into looking at other people's work and really thinking about why I react to things in a particular way. So when I read novels, I'm more mindful of the ones I don't like than the ones I do like. So when I react badly to a novel and I'm ready to put it down, I try to stop and think about what's going on here. What do I not like about this? And what can I learn from this that will help me in my own writing? I think that's really helpful. And then when I come across a workplace document where I'm just bored out of my brain and I think I just don't want to read this, stop and think, why? What is it about the way it's written? Because anything's interesting if it's written well enough. So what is it about the way that it's written that I'm not enjoying? And therefore, what can I learn from it? I think it's really helpful. So there's that reflection on writing that matters.
That level of experience. Any other comments from people? Just unmute yourselves and jump in. I'll be quiet for a second.
I was just going to say thanks, Judy, for this afternoon. It's been great.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to echo that. Thank you very much, Judy.
Thank you.
Judy, I'd like to ask a question about a bio. It's so flaming difficult to write a bio that means something. Have you got any tips or ideas about that?
No.
Yeah,
look,
I find them so difficult.
Yeah, they are. And so I would write a different one for everything I do, just about, and, what feels right today often doesn't feel right tomorrow. So if on the day that I'm asked to write a biography, I'll write the thing and send it off. And the next time I'm asked to do one, I'll do it differently. And again, I think that's okay. We change and what feels right changes. Just do that thinking about how many words do I have here? If I've got 100 words, that's not very many sentences. What do I want you to know most? What's the thing that matters most? And then I've got this way of thinking about it. It works for brochures and it works for biographies as well. I always want to start with this is. So in a biography, Judy is. And in a brochure, it'll always be this organisation is. Because I want to orient you to what's going on. So I would never start with this kind of esoteric background stuff about, that will slowly introduce me to my topic. It'll be the subject and is. And that gives me a pattern that helps to work on it.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Peter, did you have more you wanted to say? I thought you wanted to say more. No? Okay.
No, this is. That's it.
I think you've got one very, very happy listener there, Judy.
I've read a whole book on the verb to be. I really, really do have a book about the verb to be. And there you go. That's an example of it. Something is. Very great word.
It is. It is. Any other comments or questions? Please feel free to jump in. I'll be quiet again.
I just wanted to say to tell most people, find the right publisher. When you've written something, you need to check what sort of books your publisher is interested in publishing.
Very good advice, Helen. And I did notice you wrote a comment earlier about when you were having your work edited, they called your achievement a miracle, whereas you know, and anyone who's read and studied on neuroplasticity knows that it is also a little bit more than a miracle. It's hard work. And it's scientific based. So
miracles actually don't happen anymore, and that is confirmed in the Bible. The Bible actually says miracles do not happen. They did happen when Jesus was around, but he's not here.
Indeed. Are there any other comments or questions from people at this stage on?
Hi, Jim. John Bradley. Thank you, Judy. And thanks for setting this up. I mean, what a great way to meet everybody. Certain things have changed over the last month or two, and getting information like this all at once and then sharing it with everyone else is certainly a great deal of fun. So thank you one and all.
Thank you, John. Judy, did you want to? Look, I just want to say that, John, that's what this to me has been all about. Judy, can I just ask you to stop your share at the moment? There is a slide.
Then you
there
can
is a slide I just want to put up that summarises a little bit of what.
John,
there.
Stop share. I'm trying to reshare.
I just want to put this slide up for everybody because it summarises exactly what John was just talking about. And it's what, to me, is the basis of why the Fellowship of Australian Writers Queensland does this sort of work. So we are about creating connections, and that's what it's all about. So thank you, John. Are there any other comments from people?
A lot of people expressing their appreciation, and I think a lot of people found just letting it go and accepting that nothing is going to be perfect very freeing, because I think that we're our own harshest critics. I know I hate putting out anything that is anything less than perfect, so it's good to be reminded that nobody is perfect, nobody's story is going to be perfect.
And I get really worried about people who put themselves up on a pedestal of perfection, because and that's why I don't criticize other people's. So at an editorial level, unless I'm asked to criticize, I don't criticize, because it's not my job to. And it would suggest that I am amazing and know all this stuff that other people don't know. And it's just not true. This is what I do for a living, so I know how to do it. But I don't know all the answers, not by any stretch of the imagination. Like a lot of you, I went to school in Queensland when there was no grammar taught, and that means that I lack a lot of the words to talk about what I do. And it doesn't work to aim for perfection or to suggest that any one of us knows it all.
Yeah.
It's look, as an old English teacher, I know exactly what you're saying, and it's
must
people
have been
who...
taught by me, Judy. I would have bored you absolutely endlessly with grammar.
John, I'm afraid I was the teacher who didn't think that grammar was terribly that important. I wanted kids to respond creatively, but anyway, that's just letting out a little secret, I think. Any other comments from other people? Please. Look, we might just leave it there in that case. So,
can I just say one thing, Jim, before we go?
Certainly, John.
Just before we're talking about, one of the things I find very good, and I have a great editor here in my wife, but also to send whatever little bits and pieces of work to people who you trust. You know, a good friend is one who you can say no to you and you can actually accept it. And sometimes just the mere act of sending something to somebody then makes it you more aware that in fact you've had your first exposure. And that first exposure is going to sometimes bring you back to the reality that what you actually look at isn't as crash on as you thought it was. So that's one of the ways I get around it anyhow. Thanks.
The importance of sharing.
Yeah.
Judy?
Yeah, I think sharing your work is useful, but when you're ready to share it, you know, if you share it too early, then there's the risk that what you're sharing is a mess and other people can't see the value in it. So yes, at some point share, but share it when you're ready to share it.
Correct, yeah.
Absolutely. Any other comments before we say that we'll wind up?
Yes, that I think we found a great way to do things, Jim, for FAWQ.
Thank you, Russell, and thank you for all of your help. And look, can I then bring things to a conclusion? And can I bring them to a conclusion, first of all, by thanking Dr. Judy Gregory on behalf of all of us. I know, Judy, that what you have given us today is absolutely invaluable. It's helped every one of us. There's been comments all the way down, and I will be, as I said, producing those comments in a document and sending them out to all the participants here today to their emails, and you'll get a copy of that as well. So, can I just comment though that you started by saying after my introduction that didn't sound like you. Well, now that we've heard you, it definitely does. So we want to thank you and thank you so much for what you've done. Can I also thank my two assistants, Aoife and Renee, for your effort in following the chat. It's quite extensive and I picked up a little bit, but not a great deal. So thank you for all you've done. And can I also thank the other members of the Committee of the Fellowship of Australian Writers Queensland. We are an organisation that has been in operation since 1921. We're 99 years old. We turn 100 next year, and we're going to be celebrating that. And we're going to be celebrating that with a festival that has the theme, Stories Creating Connection. And that's why I just put up that slide. To me, connection is what this is about. We are in difficult times. We are in times where the normal face-to-face connection is somewhat problematic. This has given us an opportunity. It will not replace that face-to-face connection. Nothing ever can, because we are human. But what it can do is enhance that face-to-face connection. So thank you all for being part of it. It's the first time that the fellowship has done this, and I think the first time that a writers group has attempted a meeting on this scale. So thank you, Judy Gregory. Thank you all the participants, and happy writing, folks.